You won't want to miss this. Before we jump in, hit subscribe, like this video, and drop a comment. Trust me, you'll be glad you did. The storm had rolled in faster than Rec McPherson expected, the night sky unleashing a torrential downpour as his truck struggled against the elements. The cabin in the woods wasn't far now, maybe 15 minutes, but every second felt like an eternity. The rain came down in sheets, and the truck's wipers flailed uselessly, barely managing to keep the windshield clear. The forest road was narrow, winding through dense trees that swayed violently under the gale. Rec's focus was locked on the road ahead, but even his sharp eyes struggled to penetrate the darkness. Damn weather, he muttered under his breath, tapping the dashboard as if the old truck's heater could somehow help. He glanced at the empty thermos in the passenger seat, regretting not filling it with coffee before leaving the diner. The long hours on the road had left him drained, and the rain wasn't helping. Then, he saw it. At first, Rec thought his tired mind was playing tricks on him. A figure emerged on the roadside, barely visible through the rain, a lone, staggering silhouette. He gripped the wheel tighter, slowing down instinctively. Most folks didn't wander out here, especially not in weather like this. The figure moved erratically, stumbling as though they were about to collapse. Rec's first instinct was to keep driving. Trouble wasn't something he went looking for. Life had already given him his share. But as the truck drew closer, a bolt of lightning illuminated the scene, and Rec's breath caught. It was a woman. She was tall, slender, and barefoot, her feet slipping on the wet gravel as she staggered forward. Her clothes were shredded, clinging to her soaked frame, and her long silver hair was plastered to her face. But it wasn't her clothes or her hair that stopped Rec cold. It was her skin. Her skin glowed faintly, a luminous blue that shimmered with every movement, as though her body were made of living light. Rec blinked, unsure if what he was seeing was real. The glow was subtle but unmistakable, even in the dim light of his truck's high beams. Then she turned her head, and Rec saw her eyes. They were unlike anything he'd ever seen, shifting and swirling with colors that reminded him of distant galaxies. Nebulas, star clusters, and vibrant cosmic hues danced within them, captivating and alien. It sent a chill down his spine, not just because it was unnatural, but because those eyes seemed ancient. What the hell? Rec muttered, his heart pounding. He slammed on the brakes, the truck skidding slightly before coming to a halt. For a moment, he just sat there, gripping the wheel, staring at the woman through the rain-streaked windshield. Every rational part of him screamed to leave. She wasn't his problem. Whatever she was dangerous. He could feel it in his gut. But something about the way she moved, the unsteadiness of her steps, tugged at him. She wasn't just wandering aimlessly. She was barely holding herself upright. Before he could talk himself out of it, Rec pushed open the truck door. The storm hit him like a wall. The freezing rain soaked through his jacket instantly as he stepped out onto the slick road. His boots splashed in the growing puddles as he approached the figure cautiously, his hand resting instinctively on the hunting knife strapped to his belt. "Hey!" he called out, his voice barely cutting through the howling wind. "You okay?" The woman didn't respond. She took another shaky step before collapsing onto the asphalt, her glowing form crumpling like a rag doll. "Shit!" Rec muttered, quickening his pace. He crouched beside her, his hands hesitating over her still body. Up close, the glow of her skin was even more pronounced, illuminating the rain pooling around her. She was trembling, her breaths shallow and uneven. "Hey!" Rec said again, louder this time. "Can you hear me?" No response. His eyes darted over her, searching for any sign of injury, but there was no blood, at least none that he could see. Her body radiated heat, an unnatural warmth that Rec could feel even through his soaked jacket. It was wrong. Everything about this was wrong. "This is a bad idea," he muttered to himself, but leaving her here didn't sit right. With a grunt, Rec slid his arms beneath her, lifting her off the ground. She was lighter than she should have been, almost weightless, and her head lolled against his shoulder as he carried her back to the truck. Her breath was hot against his neck, the contrast stark against the cold rain. Rec placed her carefully in the passenger seat, pulling the seatbelt across her glowing form. As he climbed back into the driver's seat, he glanced at her again. The faint light emanating from her skin cast an otherworldly glow inside the truck, illuminating the worn leather seats and cracked dashboard. "What the hell are you?" Rek muttered, shifting the truck into gear. The drive to his cabin was tense. Rek's mind raced, trying to make sense of what had just happened. He had grown up hearing stories about UFO sightings and government cover-ups, but he'd always dismissed them as conspiracy nonsense. Now, with this glowing, otherworldly woman in his passenger seat, he wasn't so sure. He considered taking her to the nearest hospital or police station, but something told him that would only make things worse, for her and for him. She wasn't human, and Rek doubted any authorities would handle her with compassion. "Looks like you're stuck with me," he muttered, glancing at her unconscious form. She didn't stir. By the time Rek pulled into the clearing where his cabin sat, the storm had eased into a steady drizzle. The cabin was a modest, weathered structure surrounded by towering pines, its wooden porch creaking under the weight of the rain. He killed the engine and turned to her, hesitating. She looked even worse now, her glow dimmer than before. Rek sighed. "You better not make me regret this," he muttered, stepping out into the rain once more. He opened the passenger door and lifted her again, carrying her up the wooden steps and shouldering the cabin door open. Inside, the air was cold and stale, the power knocked out by the storm. Rek set her gently on the couch, pulling a threadbare blanket from the backrest and draping it over her. For a moment, he just stood there, staring down at her. She looked fragile, despite her alien features. Her glowing skin was smooth and flawless, devoid of the imperfections he'd expect from a human. Her silver hair framed her face, still damp from the rain. "All right?" Rek muttered, running a hand through his wet hair. "Now what?" His instincts told him to search her for any signs of injury, but he hesitated. Something about touching her felt wrong. He crouched beside the couch, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Her skin was cool now, almost unnaturally so, and he could see faint, intricate patterns etched into her temples, like circuitry beneath her skin. "What did I just get myself into?" he whispered. He stood and grabbed a towel from the bathroom, drying his hair as he paced the small living room. His mind warred between fear and curiosity. He didn't know who, or what, this woman was, but one thing was certain. His life wasn't going to be the same. Outside, the rain continued to fall, but inside the cabin, an eerie stillness settled. The glow from the woman's skin cast faint, shifting patterns on the walls, and Rek couldn't shake the feeling that whatever had brought her here wasn't finished yet. For now, all he could do was wait. The first rays of sunlight crept through the rain-streaked windows, casting a pale glow across the cabin's interior. Rek McPherson had spent most of the night pacing, checking and rechecking the locks on the doors and windows. The storm had subsided, leaving the forest damp and silent, but Rek's unease lingered. He stole another glance at the couch, where the strange woman, Leorha, as she would later introduce herself, lay motionless beneath a blanket. The glow of her skin had faded to a faint shimmer, and her breathing, though uneven, had steadied. Every so often, she twitched, murmuring something incomprehensible. Rek leaned against the counter in the small kitchen area, nursing a mug of lukewarm coffee. He couldn't shake the image of her kaleidoscope eyes, swirling with cosmic light like distant galaxies. The memory of her collapsing in the rain, radiating heat and light, replayed in his mind. He didn't know what she was, but one thing was certain. She wasn't from around here. As the morning grew brighter, Leorha stirred. Her movements were slight at first, a twitch of her fingers, a shift of her head, but soon her eyes fluttered open. Rek froze, the mug halfway to his lips. Her gaze locked onto him, and for a moment, the room seemed to shrink around them. Those eyes, brilliant and alien, were hypnotic, like looking into the vastness of space itself. Rek set the mug down, unsure whether to approach or keep his distance. "Morning," he said cautiously, his voice low and gravelly from lack of sleep. The woman blinked, her expression blank as she took in her surroundings. Slowly, she sat up, the blanket slipping from her shoulders to reveal the smooth, shimmering blue of her skin. Rek tensed, unsure if she was about to bolt or collapse again. "You helped me," she said, her voice soft and melodic, but laced with exhaustion. Rek nodded. "Yeah. Found you on the side of the road last night. Figured you weren't doing too well." Her gaze lingered on him, unblinking, as if she were assessing him. "Why?" The question caught Rek off guard. "Why?" he repeated. "Why did you stop?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why help a stranger?" Rek shifted uncomfortably. He wasn't the type to give deep, philosophical answers. "Seemed like the right thing to do," he said simply. The woman tilted her head, studying him. Her silver hair, now dry, shimmered faintly in the sunlight streaming through the window. "You are human," she said, more to herself than to him. "That obvious, huh?" Rek replied, crossing his arms. "What about you? Got a name?" She hesitated, as if considering whether to answer. "I am Learha," she said finally. "Learha," Rek repeated, the name foreign on his tongue. "All right. Mind telling me what you're doing out here in the middle of nowhere? And, what you are?" Learha's gaze dropped to her hands, which rested in her lap. For a moment, she said nothing, and Rek wondered if she'd even heard him. Then she spoke. "I am not from this place," she began, her voice quiet but steady. "Not from this world." Rek nodded slowly. Figured as much. The glowing skin and all kind of gave it away. She glanced up at him, a flicker of amusement crossing her features before fading into something more solemn. "I come from a world far from here. A world where survival has shaped everything. Our laws, our people, our purpose." Rek leaned back against the counter, watching her intently. "And what brought you to this world? You don't exactly look like you're on vacation." Learha's hands curled into fists, the faint shimmer of her skin pulsing slightly. "I was exiled," she said after a pause. "Hunted." Rek's brows furrowed. "Hunted? By who?" "My own people," she admitted, her voice tightening. "I was a bioengineer. My work was controversial, dangerous, according to the rulers of my world." "What kind of work?" Rek asked, his curiosity outweighing his caution. Learha hesitated, then reached into the folds of her tattered clothing and pulled out a small metallic cube. It was no larger than a deck of cards, its surface smooth and seamless except for faint, glowing lines that pulsed rhythmically. She held it out, her hands trembling slightly. "This?" she said, her voice almost reverent. Rek frowned, stepping closer to examine the object. "What is it?" "It is a prototype," Learha explained. "A genetic adaptation module. It can rewrite DNA, allowing any organism to adapt to its environment. With this, my people could have survived the collapse of our world. We could have evolved beyond the confines of our biology." Rek whistled low, his mind racing to comprehend what she was saying. "So, what? This thing makes you evolve? Like, instantly?" Learha nodded. "Not instantly, but rapidly. It enhances the natural process, guiding it to meet the needs of the individual or the environment." "And your people didn't like that idea?" "They feared it," she said, her tone bitter. "My world is ruled by those who value control above all else. Change threatens that control. My research was deemed a violation of our laws, a threat to the established order. They destroyed my lab, erased my work, and declared me a traitor." Rek crossed his arms, his jaw tightening. He had seen his fair share of oppressive systems in his time, governments, corporations, and everything in between. Learha's story wasn't so different, even if it came from another world. "So they sent someone after you," he said, his voice steady. Learha's kaleidoscope eyes met his. "Not someone. Everyone. They will not stop until I am eliminated, and every trace of my work is erased." Rek exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. He didn't know what he had expected her story to be, but this wasn't it. Aliens. Fugitive scientists. Advanced technology that could rewrite DNA. It was a lot to take in. "And now they're here," Rek muttered. "Or at least, they're coming." Liorha nodded, her expression grim. The energy signature of the prototype is traceable. They will send scout probes first, machines designed to locate me. Once they find evidence of my presence, they will escalate. Escalate how? Rek asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. They will send an extraction team, Liorha said. Elite operatives. If they fail, she hesitated, her gaze dropping to the cube in her hands. If they fail, what? Rek pressed. Liorha looked up at him, her expression hardening. They will deploy orbital strikes. They will burn everything in a wide radius to ensure nothing survives. Rek's stomach turned. He had been in tight spots before, but this was something else entirely. He glanced at the cube in Liorha's hands, its faint glow casting patterns on her shimmering skin. You should have just left me on the road, she said suddenly, her voice quieter. Rek shook his head. Not how I'm built. Liorha studied him for a moment, her expression unreadable. Then you are in danger now. Because of me. Yeah, Rek said, grabbing his rifle from where it leaned against the wall. Guess that makes us both fugitives, doesn't it? A faint smile tugged at the corners of her mouth, but it didn't reach her eyes. You are a strange man, Rek McPherson. Strange. Rek smirked, checking the rifle's chamber. Lady, you don't know the half of it. As the sunlight grew brighter and the forest outside stirred to life, Rek knew one thing for sure. He was in this now. Whether he liked it or not, Liorha and her dangerous, world-changing prototype were his responsibility. We've got work to do, he said, his voice firm. Liorha nodded, gripping the cube tightly. Then we should begin. The storm outside had passed, but inside the cabin, Rek felt the weight of the storm yet to come. The calm after the storm was deceptive. The morning sunlight streaming through the forest canopy cast dappled shadows on the wet ground, and the air was heavy with the scent of damp pine and rain-soaked earth. To anyone else, it might have seemed like a moment of peace. For Rek McPherson, it felt like the countdown to disaster. He stood on the porch of his cabin, his rifle resting against his shoulder, scanning the tree line for any sign of movement. Liorha had warned him about the scout probes, and now, every rustle of leaves or distant bird call set his nerves on edge. Inside, Liorha was dismantling the metallic cube, the adaptation module. She had assured Rek it wouldn't lose its functionality, but she needed to remove its energy core to mask its signal. It won't stop them from searching, she'd said, her kaleidoscope eyes locking onto his. But it might buy us time. Time, Rek thought grimly, was in short supply. Anything yet? Liorha's voice broke through the silence. Not yet, Rek replied, keeping his eyes on the tree line. But it's too quiet out here. Animals should have come back by now. Something's spooking them. Liorha stepped out onto the porch, her luminous skin dimmed slightly, a precaution she had taken to avoid detection. In her hands, she held the deconstructed pieces of the adaptation module, now neatly arranged in a small cloth bag. The energy core is secure, she said, holding up the bag. Rek glanced at her. And what about us? How secure are we? She hesitated, her lips pressing into a thin line. The probes will find us eventually, she admitted. They are thorough. Precise. Rek cursed under his breath. Great. So we're sitting ducks. Not entirely, Liorha said, stepping beside him. If we can destroy the probes before they relay our location, it will delay the escalation. Delay? Rek echoed, his tone dry. Not stop. Liorha met his gaze, her expression unflinching. It's the best we can do. Before Rek could respond, a faint hum reached his ears, a low, mechanical sound, almost imperceptible but growing steadily louder. His grip on the rifle tightened. Is that what I think it is? Liorha's eyes widened, the shifting lights within them swirling rapidly. Yes. A probe. Rek scanned the tree line, his heart pounding as the hum grew closer. It was still out of sight, but the sound was unmistakable now, an eerie vibration that seemed to resonate in his chest. Liorha crouched low, her movements fluid and silent, her gaze locked onto the forest. There, she whispered, pointing toward a cluster of trees. Rek followed her gaze and spotted it. A sleek, insect-like drone hovering between the branches. Its metallic surface shimmered like liquid, reflecting the colors of the forest around it. If he hadn't been looking directly at it, he might have missed it entirely. Damn thing's camouflaged, Rek muttered. It's scanning, Liurha said, her voice tense. We need to destroy it before it completes its cycle. Rek nodded, raising his rifle. He inhaled deeply, steadying his aim. The drone moved erratically, its body shifting and twisting as it scanned the area. Rek waited, watching its pattern, until the moment it hovered still for just a fraction of a second. Crack! The rifle's report echoed through the forest, and the drone sparked violently, its camouflaged surface flickering before it spiraled to the ground. Rek exhaled, lowering the rifle. That's one down, he said. Liurha darted forward, moving with a grace that defied her earlier exhaustion. She reached the drone's smoking wreckage and crouched beside it, her fingers working quickly to pry open a hidden compartment. Sparks flew as she extracted a small, glowing cylinder. This is its energy core, she said, holding it up for Rek to see. Without it, the probe cannot send data back to its controllers. Rek nodded, impressed despite himself. So, we're good. For now, Liurha said, standing and pocketing the core. But there will be more. The first probe is only a scout. They will send others when this one fails to report. Of course they will, Rek muttered, scanning the tree line again. Anything else we can do to slow them down? Liurha hesitated. The probes will come in waves. If we can disable enough of them, it may confuse their search patterns. But eventually, they will escalate to extraction teams. Right, Rek said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Because nothing says welcome to Earth like a bunch of alien soldiers. Liurha didn't smile. They will not hesitate to kill anyone who stands in their way. If they cannot retrieve me, they will assume I have shared my knowledge with you. That makes you a target. Rek shrugged. Figured I was already on the hit list the moment I picked you up. Liurha's gaze softened slightly. I did not intend for this, she said quietly. Rek waved her off. You didn't crash land in the middle of nowhere just to mess with my day. I get it. The hum of another probe interrupted their conversation. This time, the sound came from the opposite direction, and Rek felt a chill crawl up his spine. Another one, Liurha said, her voice sharp. 2 o'clock, Rek confirmed, pointing toward the source. They moved quickly, navigating the dense underbrush with practiced efficiency. Rek could feel the tension in the air, every step sending a jolt of adrenaline through his veins. Liurha moved ahead of him, her glowing eyes scanning the treetops. There, she whispered, pointing to a second probe hovering just above the canopy. This one was larger than the first, its metallic body bristling with what looked like sensors and small, articulated arms. It moved with purpose, scanning the ground in a precise grid pattern. Looks like it's stepping up its game, Rek muttered. We have to destroy it, Liurha said, her tone urgent. Rek nodded, raising his rifle again. He steadied his aim, waiting for the right moment. The probe's movements were more erratic than the first, its arms swiveling as it scanned the area. Rek's finger hovered over the trigger, his breathing slow and measured. Crack! The rifle barked again, and the probe erupted in a shower of sparks. It spiraled downward, its sensors flailing wildly before it crashed into the underbrush. Nice shot, Liurha said, already moving toward the wreckage. Not my first rodeo, Rek replied, following close behind. As Liurha dismantled the second probe, Rek kept watch, his rifle at the ready. The forest seemed to close in around them, the shadows growing longer as the sun dipped lower in the sky. This isn't sustainable, he said after a moment. We can't keep playing whack-a-mole with these things. Sooner or later, we're gonna get overwhelmed. Liurha nodded, her expression grim. You're right. This is only the beginning. Then we need a plan, Rek said, his voice firm. Something that doesn't involve us waiting around to get killed. Liorha paused, her kaleidoscope eyes meeting his. There is one option, she said slowly. Let's hear it. I can activate the adaptation module, she said, her tone careful. It would alter your biology, allowing you to survive the escalation. Rek frowned. You mean make me like you? Not exactly, Liorha said. It would enhance your natural abilities, your strength, your reflexes, your resilience. You would stand a better chance against them. Rek considered this, the weight of her words sinking in. He wasn't sure he wanted to know what enhancing his biology entailed, but if it meant surviving the inevitable onslaught, it might be worth it. All right, he said finally. Let's do it. Liorha nodded, her expression unreadable. It won't be easy, she warned. And there's no guarantee it will work. Story of my life, Rex said with a wry smile. As they made their way back to the cabin, the forest seemed to hold its breath, the tension thick and oppressive. Rek knew the real fight was only just beginning, but for the first time, he felt a spark of hope. If the hunters wanted a fight, they'd get one. The forest's stillness didn't last. By the time Rek and Liorha returned to the cabin, the air felt charged, electric with the tension of a battle not yet fought. The faint hums of the scout probes had faded, but Rek knew it was only a matter of time before more arrived, or worse, the extraction teams. Inside the cabin, Liorha laid out the adaptation module on the table. Its deconstructed parts gleamed faintly in the dim light. She moved with quiet determination, reassembling the device with swift, practiced movements. Rek leaned against the counter, his rifle within arm's reach, watching her work. So, how's this thing gonna help us again? He asked, his voice cutting through the silence. Liorha didn't look up. The adaptation module will alter your genetic structure, she said, her tone clinical. It will make you stronger, faster, and more resilient. You will be able to endure conditions that would otherwise kill you. Sounds like a hell of a gamble, Rek muttered, crossing his arms. It is, Liorha admitted, glancing up at him. The process is experimental. I cannot guarantee it will succeed, but it may be our only chance. Rek exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. And what about you? Why not use it on yourself? Liorha hesitated, her gaze dropping to the module. My DNA is already heavily modified, she said softly. Introducing another layer of alterations could destabilize me. The risk is too great. Rek frowned but didn't press the issue. He had seen enough to trust that Liorha knew what she was talking about. All right, he said finally. Let's get this over with. Liorha nodded, her hands moving quickly to finish the module's reassembly. When it was complete, she activated it, and the device came to life with a soft hum. A faint blue light emanated from its core, casting intricate patterns on the walls. Sit, Liorha instructed, gesturing to a chair near the table. Rek complied, his pulse quickening as she brought the module closer. This isn't gonna hurt, is it? Liorha tilted her head, considering the question. It will be unpleasant, she said. Fantastic, Rek muttered, gripping the edges of the chair. She placed the module against his forearm, and the device latched onto his skin with an almost organic motion. A sharp, burning sensation shot through his arm, spreading rapidly through his body. Rek gritted his teeth, sweat beading on his forehead as his muscles tensed. Breathe, Liorha said, her voice steady. The pain will pass. Rek wasn't so sure. It felt like his body was being torn apart and rebuilt at the same time, every nerve alight with fire. He clenched his fists, forcing himself to stay still. Gradually, the pain began to subside, replaced by a strange, tingling warmth that spread through his limbs. The module detached, its glow fading as it fell silent. Rek slumped back in the chair, breathing heavily. Well, he said, his voice hoarse. That was something. Liorha studied him intently, her kaleidoscope eyes scanning his face. How do you feel? Rek flexed his fingers, then stood, testing his balance. Stronger, he admitted, surprised by the ease with which he moved. His senses felt sharper, his body lighter. But we won't know if it's enough until they show up, will we? Lior-Ha nodded solemnly. No, we won't. The sun dipped below the horizon, and darkness fell over the forest. Rek and Lior-Ha fortified the cabin as best they could, setting up makeshift barricades and laying out what little ammunition and supplies they had. The tension was palpable, every creak of the wooden floorboards making Rek's pulse spike. They're coming, Lior-Ha said quietly as she stood by the window, her glowing eyes scanning the tree line. Rek joined her, his rifle in hand. How can you tell? The air feels different, she said. Charged. It's how they travel. Their technology disrupts the natural balance. Rek squinted into the darkness. At first, he saw nothing, but then, faint lights began to appear among the trees. Cold, white lights moving in perfect unison. His grip on the rifle tightened. That them? Yes, Lior-Ha said, her voice firm. Extraction operatives. 5, maybe 6. They will be highly trained and heavily armed. Rek exhaled sharply. Great. Let's see how enhanced I really am. The operatives moved swiftly, their footsteps barely audible as they approached the cabin. Rek counted 5 of them, their sleek, black armor reflecting the moonlight. Each carried advanced weaponry, their helmets obscuring their faces. They'll try to flush us out, Lior-Ha said, stepping back from the window. Their tactics are precise. We need to stay ahead of them. Stick close to me, Rek said, his voice low. We'll take them down one at a time. The first operative breached the door with a controlled explosion, the wooden barrier splintering under the force. Rek fired instinctively, the enhanced speed of his reflexes catching even him by surprise. The shot struck the operative square in the chest, sending him sprawling backward. Not bad, Lior-Ha said, her tone tinged with approval. No time for compliments, Rek replied, reloading quickly. The remaining operatives spread out, their movements methodical. One lobbed a small device into the cabin, a spherical drone that emitted a high-pitched whine. Lior-Ha lunged forward, her hands glowing as she grabbed the drone and crushed it with surprising strength. Nice trick, Rek said, firing another shot at an operative who had flanked them. The fight was intense, the confined space of the cabin amplifying every sound and movement. Rek's enhanced abilities gave him an edge, but the operatives were relentless, their tactics designed to overwhelm. Lior-Ha fought alongside him, her movements a blur as she struck with precision. 2 left, Rek said, ducking behind the overturned table as bullets ricocheted off the walls. Lior-Ha nodded, her gaze sharp. We need to end this quickly. Together, they coordinated their attack, Rek providing cover fire while Lior-Ha moved in close. She dispatched one operative with a swift, calculated blow, while Rek took down the last with a well-placed shot. The cabin fell silent once more, the only sounds their ragged breathing and the faint hum of the operatives' equipment. That all of them? Rek asked, scanning the room. For now, Lior-Ha said. But more will come. And if they fail? Orbital strike, Rek finished, his jaw tightening. We need to move. As they prepared to leave, a low rumble shook the ground. Lior-Ha froze, her eyes widening in alarm. They're escalating, she said, her voice trembling. What does that mean? Rek demanded. Lior-Ha turned to him, the light in her eyes dimming. The orbital strike. It's already begun. Rek cursed, grabbing the adaptation module from the table. Can we stop it? No, Lior-Ha said. But we can divert it. How? She hesitated, then stepped closer. The module has enough energy to generate a decoy signature. If I activate it at full power, it will draw the strike away from us. Rek stared at her, his heart sinking. And what happens to you? Lior-Ha smiled faintly. You know the answer. No, Rek said, shaking his head. We'll find another way. There is no time, Lior-Ha said firmly. She placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch warm. You saved me when you didn't have to. Let me do this. Rek's throat tightened. You don't have to die. Neither do you, Lior-Ha said softly. Before Rek could protest, she activated the module and stepped outside. Her glowing form became a beacon, radiating energy that lit up the forest. The sky roared as fire rained down, but the strike veered away, drawn to Lirha's signal. Rek watched, helpless, as the light consumed her. When the smoke cleared, the forest was silent once more. Lirha was gone, her sacrifice etched into the scorched earth. Rek stood alone, the adaptation modules remains in his hands. "You saved me," he whispered, his voice breaking. In the days that followed, Rek began studying the remnants of the module, determined to honor Lirha's legacy. He didn't know if he could rebuild it, but he vowed to try. The fight wasn't over, not for him, and not for her dream of a better future.